He did this, and his life changed forever. He was always just an ordinary student, awkward, brilliant, misunderstood. His days passed by quietly, nothing hinted at trouble. But one day, something happened that turned everything upside down. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. Just a quiet return to his old school in Pretoria. No cameras, no press, just Elon Musk slipping through the gates like a ghost from the past. But then, things started to get even stranger. Seconds felt like an eternity. His heart was pounding. And then, at that very moment when it seemed like there was no turning back, he saw him, Mr. Vermaak, the man who had nearly expelled him after a catastrophic lab fire at 15, but instead offered him something far more powerful, a second chance. But the most unbelievable part happened after that. It was so incredible that if someone had told him before, he never would have believed it, because the man who changed Elon Musk's life once was about to do it again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The driver had been instructed to use the service entrance. No security detail. No advance notice. Just a black Mercedes with tinted windows pulling up to the worn stone gates of Pretoria Boys High School at precisely 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, when classes would be in full swing and attention elsewhere. Elon Musk sat motionless in the back seat, staring through the window at the sandstone walls that had once contained his adolescent self. He hadn't visited in over 3 decades. The school hadn't changed much. Perhaps that was what made his stomach tighten. Time had polished the rest of the world to a gleaming future, while these walls remained stubbornly anchored to the past. His past. "Sir," his driver said, interrupting his thoughts. "We've arrived." Elon nodded, swallowing against the unexpected dryness in his throat. "Wait here. I won't be long." As he stepped from the car, the African sun hit him with familiar intensity. February heat in Pretoria. His body remembered it before his mind could catch up. He wore simple clothes, khaki trousers, a navy button-down, no tie, nothing that screamed billionaire, nothing that invited recognition. He'd planned this detour meticulously. The rest of his trip to South Africa was plotted down to the minute. Sustainable energy initiatives in Cape Town, a satellite communications project outside Johannesburg. But this visit appeared on no official itinerary. Just 2 hours carved from his schedule, a personal pilgrimage disguised as a brief rest period. A young administrative assistant waited nervously at the entrance, shifting her weight from one foot to another. "Mr. Musk, welcome back to Pretoria Boys High." She extended her hand. "I'm Dineo. Dr. Kumalo sends his apologies. He had a district meeting he couldn't reschedule, but he's arranged for me to. I'd prefer to walk alone if that's all right." Elon interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "Oh." Her smile faltered. "Dr. Kumalo thought you might want a formal tour. We've prepared the school hall for a small gathering of the science faculty and top students who would be honored to. No gatherings." Elon softened his tone, seeing disappointment flash across her face. "I'm not here as that person, just a former student visiting his old school, privately." She hesitated, clearly having prepared for something entirely different. "Of course, sir. But perhaps I could just show you where things are. The school has changed in some ways since. The layout is burned into my memory," he said, surprising himself with how true the words felt. "I'll find my way." Reluctantly, she handed him a visitor's badge. "If you need anything at all." But he was already walking away, badge dangling unused from his fingers. He slipped it into his pocket and moved deeper into the school grounds, grateful for the anonymity granted by the class schedule. A few groundskeepers glanced his way but returned to their work without recognition. The occasional teacher hurried past with arms full of papers, too preoccupied to notice him. The corridors echoed with his footsteps. The familiar smell hit him: floor polish, old books, teenage boys in their various scents, unchanged since his time here. He passed classrooms with doors ajar, catching fragments of lessons, mathematics formulas on a whiteboard, the cadence of Afrikaans poetry, a physics demonstration involving a vacuum chamber. He paused outside that particular room, watching as a teacher demonstrated air pressure principles. In the front row, a lanky boy with unkempt hair scribbled frantically in his notebook, hand barely keeping pace with his thoughts. Something about the boy's intense focus, his isolation despite being surrounded by classmates, sent a jolt of recognition through Elon. Moving on, he found himself heading toward the library, not consciously, but as if his feet remembered a path worn by a teenage version of himself seeking refuge from the schoolyard's social complexities. The heavy wooden door creaked exactly as it had decades ago. The library appeared smaller than he remembered, though the high ceilings and tall shelves still created the impression of an academic sanctuary. Late afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. The space was empty save for a few students tucked in distant corners, and an elderly man methodically shelving books from a wooden cart. Elon froze. The man stood with his back to him, carefully sliding each volume into place with practiced precision. His movements were deliberate, economical, the motions of someone who had performed this task thousands of times. Though stooped with age, there was dignity in his posture, a kind of quiet authority that Elon recognized immediately. Mr. Anton Vermaak. Older, frailer, but unmistakable, Elon had assumed he'd be long retired, or gone. Yet here he was, still tending to books as he had been when Elon was 15, awkward and angry at the world. The sight of the man sent an unexpected wave of emotion through him. He must have made some sound because Mr. Vermaak turned, peering over reading glasses that sat low on his nose. "May I help you find something?" the old man asked, his voice thinner than Elon remembered but with the same measured tone that had commanded respect from generations of schoolboys. For a moment, Elon couldn't speak. He'd rehearsed various scenarios for this trip, calculated risks, prepared statements, but had never factored in this possibility. He felt suddenly, irrationally exposed, as if the billions of dollars, the companies, the rockets, the cars, all of it, had been stripped away, leaving only the boy who had once stood trembling in this man's office. "Mr. Vermaak," he finally managed. "You probably don't—" "Elon Musk," the old man said quietly, removing his glasses. His eyes, alert, piercing despite the cloudy blue of age, studied Elon's face. "Of course I remember you." Something unreadable passed across Mr. Vermaak's features. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. He carefully placed his glasses in his shirt pocket and extended a hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "It's been many years," Vermaak said, releasing Elon's hand. 34, Elon replied. 34 years, 2 months, and about 16 days, give or take. The old man corrected with the faintest trace of a smile. "Not that I've been counting, of course." The tension broke slightly. Elon found himself smiling, a genuine expression that felt foreign on his face. "I confess I'm surprised to see you here," Elon said. "I would have thought that I'd be dead?" Vermaak finished for him, arching an eyebrow. "Or at least put out to pasture. The school tried retiring me twice. It didn't take either time." He gestured to his cart of books. "I volunteer 3 days a week, keeping the collection in order. The new librarian has modern ideas about digital catalogs, but some things require human touch." An awkward silence fell between them. There was too much to say. Too many years. Too many words unspoken. Elon glanced around the library, seeking something to focus on besides the unexpected emotions rising in his chest. His gaze settled on a wall of framed photographs near the study carrels, school events, science fairs, debate teams from years past. He moved toward them, scanning the yellowing images until he stopped at one in particular. Behind glass dulled by years of dust stood a teenage version of himself, skinny, uncomfortable, in his own skin, holding a crude device cobbled together from spare electronics. The 1988 Transvaal Science Fair winner's certificate was barely visible in the photo's corner. No one had cleaned this frame in years. No one had deemed it important enough. "Your electromagnetic levitation project," Mr. Vermaak said, coming to stand beside him. "You nearly set the gymnasium on fire testing it the night before." Elon looked at him sharply. "You knew about that?" I knew about most things that happened in my school, Vermaak replied. I simply chose my battles carefully. Before Elon could respond, the library door opened. A woman in her late 30s entered, carrying a stack of papers. She had Mr. Vermaak's eyes, the same penetrating quality, though hers were brown rather than blue, and moved with similar deliberate purpose. "Upa, your medication," she said in gentle admonishment, placing her papers on the desk. She stopped short when she noticed Elon. Recognition flashed across her face, quickly replaced by something cooler, more guarded. "Naledi," Mr. Vermaak said. "This is—" "I know who Mr. Musk is, Upa." Her tone was politely neutral as she extended her hand. "Naledi Vermaak, I'm the school librarian, and granddaughter to this stubborn old man who refuses to follow doctor's orders about resting. The joy of being 89, Vermaak said dryly, is that doctor's orders become more like doctor's suggestions." Elon shook her hand, noting the careful assessment in her eyes. She was taking his measure, not as a celebrity or billionaire, but as something else. A potential disruption, perhaps. "I didn't mean to interrupt your work," Elon said. "I was just passing through Pretoria and thought I'd visit my old school." "Without publicity or cameras?" Naledi asked, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "That's refreshing." "Naledi," her grandfather chided softly. "It's fine," Elon said. "She's right to be suspicious. People in my position usually want something." He turned back to the photo of his younger self. "But sometimes we just need to remember where we came from." Mr. Vermaak nodded slowly. "Memory is a complicated gift, both burden and blessing." He glanced at his watch. "I should finish these shelves before the final bell. The afternoon rush will start soon." "I can take over, Upa," Naledi said. "You've been on your feet for hours." "Nonsense. I'm perfectly—" A small cough interrupted him, followed by another. Naledi was immediately at his side, guiding him to a nearby chair. "Stubborn," she muttered, though her hands were gentle as she helped him sit. "I'll get your water," as she walked away. Mr. Vermaak waved off Elon's concerned look. Dust in the throat. Nothing more. Old buildings have their hazards. Elon looked around the library with new eyes, noting the worn carpet, the aging shelves, the outdated computer, terminals. The school had clearly maintained its classical appearance but lacked the funding for meaningful updates. Something tightened in his chest. "Sir?" he began, then stopped, unsure how to continue, how to express what was building inside him, a debt he'd carried for decades without examining it. "Mr. Vermaak," the old man held up a hand. "If you're about to offer some grand gesture, please don't. This library has stood for over a century. It will survive a bit longer without intervention." "That's not—" Elon started, then fell silent as Naledi returned with water and medication. The bell rang, signaling the end of classes. Within moments, the library's peaceful atmosphere would be shattered by the influx of students. "Perhaps," Mr. Vermaak said, taking a careful sip of water, "you might consider returning tomorrow, when we have more time to speak properly." His eyes met Elon's with unexpected intensity. "There are things worth revisiting, I think." The invitation hung in the air between them, an opportunity, Elon realized, that he might never have again. Tomorrow's schedule included 3 major meetings, 2 video conferences and a site visit. Rearranging it would cause cascading disruptions to plans months in the making. "I'll be here," Elon said without hesitation. "Same time?" Mr. Vermaak nodded, satisfaction visible in the slight upward turn of his mouth. "The past will wait patiently. For you, Elon Musk. It always does." As he turned to leave, Elon caught Naledi watching him with guarded curiosity. Their eyes met briefly before he nodded a goodbye and stepped into the corridor, now filling with boys in school uniforms who flowed around him without recognition. Outside, his driver stood by the car door, relief visible on his face when Elon emerged. "Change of plans," Elon said as he slid into the back seat. "We'll need to rework tomorrow's schedule. I'm coming back here." "But sir, the ministerial meeting—" Reschedule it. As the car pulled away, Elon looked back at the stone facade of the school. Something had been awakened inside him. A debt unpaid, a chapter left unfinished. For the first time in years, something mattered more than the relentless forward momentum of his empire. Tomorrow he would return. Not as the man the world knew, but as the boy these halls remembered, the one who had almost burned his future to cinders before a stern but compassionate principal had offered him a second chance instead of expulsion. Mr. Vermaak had been right. The past waited patiently, and after 34 years it was finally time to acknowledge it. Elon's driver pulled up to the service entrance of Pretoria Boys High School at exactly 2:15 p.m. the following day. The Mercedes idled quietly as Elon stared through the window at the worn stone steps. Despite commanding boardrooms filled with executives and addressing stadiums packed with thousands, he felt an unfamiliar flutter of nervousness. "Should I wait here again, sir?" his driver asked, breaking the silence. "Yes," Elon replied, his eyes still fixed on the school. "But it might be longer today." He stepped from the car into the February heat, pausing to straighten his collar in a rare moment of self-consciousness. Unlike yesterday's impromptu visit, today he'd come prepared, or so he thought. Yet as he approached the entrance, the weight of memories made each step heavier than the last. Dineo, the administrative assistant, from the previous day, waited just inside, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Musk." She greeted him with a slight nod. "Mr. Vermaak asked me to escort you today." "Thank you," he said, surprising himself with his compliance. Yesterday he'd rebuffed any guide, but today felt different. The destination more specific, more loaded. They walked in silence through corridors now empty of students. Classes were in session, the quiet broken only by muffled voices behind closed doors. Dineo led him away from the library, down a hallway he remembered all too well, then stopped outside a door labeled Science Laboratory 3. "Mr. Vermaak said you'd know which one," she said, her curiosity evident, though she was too professional to ask questions. "He'll join you shortly." Elon stood alone before the closed door, his hand hovering over the handle. Behind this door lay more than a classroom. It was the site of what he'd come to think of privately as his first real failure. And his first real redemption. He pushed the door open. The laboratory had been modernized since his day. New workbenches with sleek black tops, digital equipment where analog had once stood, safety stations at regular intervals. But the bones remained the same: the tall windows along the back wall, the pattern of the tile floor, the faint chemical smell that no amount of cleaning could ever quite remove. And the brick wall at the far corner, slightly darker than the surrounding masonry, the replacement bricks never quite matching the originals. Elon moved toward it as if pulled by an unseen force. As his fingertips touched the rough surface, the present dissolved around him. June 1989, 15-year-old Elon Musk glanced nervously at his watch. 2:13 a.m. The school was silent and dark, save for the single desk lamp illuminating his workbench in the science lab. He'd been here for hours, having slipped back onto campus after curfew. The security guard made predictable rounds that were easy to avoid if you timed it right. His makeshift capacitor sat before him, cobbled together from components borrowed from the school's electronics supply and parts he'd ordered with money, saved from odd jobs. It wasn't pretty, but if his calculations were correct, it would store enough energy to power his experimental magnetic levitation system. His fingers trembled slightly as he made the final connections. Sleep deprivation, caffeine, and the exhilarating fear of breaking rules had heightened every sensation. The room smelled of solder and ozone. The only sounds were his own breathing and the occasional click of tools against metal. This would work. It had to work. He'd triple-checked the math. He connected the power supply, watching as the crude gauge he'd attached began to register the building charge. His heart raced with anticipation. If this succeeded, it would prove his theory. He'd show them all, the teachers who dismissed his questions as disruptive, the classmates who mocked his accent and ideas, the father who, no, don't think about him now. Focus. The gauge climbed steadily. 60%. 65%. The capacitor hummed with stored energy. Elon allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. T%. 75%. The humming intensified, accompanied now by a high-pitched whine that hadn't been present in previous tests. Something wasn't right. 80%. The capacitor's casing began to vibrate. A wisp of smoke escaped from around one of the terminals. Elon's satisfaction transformed into panic. He lunged for the power supply to disconnect it, but even as his hand closed around the cord, the capacitor gave a sharp crack and burst into flames. Bright chemical flames that immediately caught the papers scattered around the workbench. No, he gasped, grabbing for the small fire extinguisher underneath the bench. But in his haste, he knocked the flaming device onto the floor, where it rolled against the base of the old wooden storage cabinet. Within seconds, the cabinet was ablaze, sending up thick, acrid smoke. The fire alarm began to shriek. Sprinklers activated, drenching everything, though the water seemed to intensify rather than dampen certain parts of the chemical fire. Elon stood frozen in horror, water plastering his hair to his forehead, watching as his experiment transformed into catastrophe. The door burst open. The night security guard stood there, eyes wide with shock and anger. "What have you done?" the man shouted over the alarm. Behind him appeared Mr. Vermaak, the school principal, still buttoning his shirt over pajamas, clearly summoned from his on-campus residence by the alarm. His expression shifted from urgency to shock when he saw Elon standing there, soaked and soot-streaked. "Sir, Elon began, but words failed him as the reality of his situation sank in. Unauthorized after-hours access, stolen equipment, fire damage to school property, expulsion, his future destroyed. By one miscalculation, get out, now," Mr. Vermaak ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos as he and the guard moved toward the fire with extinguishers. Elon stumbled into the corridor, water dripping from his clothes, the smell of smoke clinging to his skin. Through the open door, he watched as the adults battled the blaze he had created. Finally, the flames subsided, leaving a charred corner of the laboratory and the bitter scent of failure hanging in the wet air. Mr. Vermaak emerged from the smoky room, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled, face streaked with soot. He looked at Elon with an unreadable expression. "My office, first thing tomorrow morning." Each word fell like a stone. It's strange, isn't it? How some memories feel more real than the present. The voice startled Elon from his reverie. He turned to find Mr. Vermaak standing in the laboratory doorway, leaning slightly on a wooden cane he hadn't carried yesterday. Despite this concession to age, he stood tall, his gaze as penetrating as it had been in Elon's memory. "This wall," Elon said, his hand still resting on the bricks. "I helped rebuild it after the fire." Mr. Vermaak nodded, walking slowly into the room. 3 weekends of labor. You insisted on doing the masonry yourself, though you had no experience with it. "I was terrible at it," Elon admitted with a small laugh. "The school mason had to redo half my work." "But you learned," Vermaak said, joining him at the wall. By the 3rd weekend, he only had to correct a quarter of it. They stood in silence. For a moment, both staring at the mismatched brickwork, a physical reminder of youthful destruction and the long, painstaking work of making amends. The door opened again, and Naledi entered, carrying a folder. She paused, sensing the charged atmosphere. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, starting to withdraw. "No, stay," Elon said, surprising himself with the invitation. "I was just remembering." He gestured to the wall. "I nearly burned down the lab when I was 15. Naledi's eyebrows rose slightly. "So the rumors are true?" She glanced at her grandfather. "Some of the older teachers still tell that story. I thought it was school mythology." "Oh, it was very real," Mr. Vermaak said, dryly. "The school board wanted him expelled immediately. The science faculty was divided. Half wanted him gone, half wanted to harness that raw talent before it exploded again." Elon turned to the old man, a question that had lingered for decades, finally finding voice. "Why didn't you expel me? It would have been justified, expected even." Mr. Vermaak considered the question carefully, as if weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he moved to one of the lab stools and lowered himself onto it with deliberate movements. The morning after the fire, he began. Before our scheduled meeting, I found Dr. Lewis. Do you remember him? The physics teacher? Elon nodded. He thought I asked too many questions. He thought you asked the right questions, Vermaak corrected. He showed me your notebook that had survived the fire. Your calculations, your diagrams. They were beyond what we were teaching, beyond what he could teach, he admitted. Vermaak's eyes took on a distant quality as he recalled that morning. 34 years prior. When you came to my office, I had already decided against expulsion. What I saw in that notebook was a mind that needed guidance, not punishment. Expelling you would have been easier. The board expected it. The other boy's parents demanded it. But education isn't about what's easy. He fixed Elon with a steady gaze. I told you then what I'll repeat now. Discipline without destruction. That was my philosophy as an educator. What you needed wasn't to be cast out, but to understand the consequences of power unchecked by responsibility. Elon swallowed against a sudden tightness in his throat. The rebuilding, working weekends to repair what I'd damaged. Precisely. Vermaak nodded. And not just manual labor. You rewired the lab's electrical system, drafted improved safety protocols, cataloged all the damaged equipment and researched replacements. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You were thorough, exhaustive even. By the time you finished, that laboratory was safer and better equipped than it had been before your mishap. Naledi had moved closer during the exchange, her initial wariness softening as she witnessed the evident history between these two men. I never knew this story, she said quietly. Not the full version. She looked at Elon with new interest. It's not in the sanitized biography they include in the school's notable alumni material. No, Elon agreed. It wouldn't be. I've never told it publicly. He hesitated, then added, I've never told it at all. The admission hung in the air between them. For a man whose life had been documented, analyzed, and speculated upon in countless articles, books, and social media posts, this felt strangely exposing, more vulnerable than any public failure or success. Why tell it now? Naledi asked, genuine curiosity replacing her earlier skepticism. Elon turned back to the mismatched wall, running his fingers along the seam where old bricks met new. Because some debts can't be paid unless they're acknowledged. First, Mr. Vermaak made a dismissive gesture with his hand. There is no debt. I was simply doing my job. No, Elon said firmly. What you did went far beyond duty. That moment, your decision, it changed everything for me. He paused, searching for words. When everyone expected punishment, you offered redemption through work. You showed me that destruction could be answered with creation, that failure wasn't final. His voice grew quieter, rougher. Do you know what my father would have done if he'd been called about the fire? The question needed no answer. The three of them stood in silence, the weight of the unspoken hanging between them. Finally, Mr. Vermaak spoke. The past shapes us, but it needn't define us. You've built remarkable things, Elon. Far beyond what I could have imagined that morning in my office. Because you gave me the chance to learn how to build in the first place, Elon replied. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against an unexpected surge of emotion. That capacitor failure, it taught me more than success ever could have. About engineering, yes, but more importantly about consequences. About responsibility. He looked around the modernized laboratory, noting the state-of-the-art equipment that now filled it. Every rocket that exploded during testing, every production, delay, every public failure, they all trace back to lessons learned here. Fail, analyze, rebuild. Better than before. Naledi watched this exchange with growing understanding. The man standing before her wasn't the tech billionaire from magazine covers and news reports. He was someone more complex. Someone shaped by failure as much as success, by second chances as much as ruthless determination. It must have been terrifying, she said suddenly, Standing in this room at 15, watching your experiment go up in flames. Elon looked at her, surprised by her perception. It was, but not because of the fire. He paused, the memory still vivid after all these years. What terrified me was the moment I realized I might never get to build anything again. That one mistake might close all doors forever. That's why you work so hard, she said. It wasn't a question. Partly, he admitted. When you've stood at the edge of losing everything once, you never quite forget the view. Mr. Vermaak rose from his stool with a slight wince that he tried to disguise. Both Elon and Naledi moved to assist him, but he waved them off with a gentle firmness. I may be old, but I'm not helpless, he said, though the strain in his voice betrayed him. Perhaps we might continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable. My joints object to these laboratory stools. Of course, Elon said immediately. We should... Actually, Naledi interrupted, seeming to make a decision. Why don't you both come to our home? It's just on the edge of campus, the old groundskeeper's cottage. I could make tea. The invitation clearly surprised her grandfather, who looked at her with raised eyebrows. Something unspoken passed between them, a private language of family. That would be lovely, Vermaak said finally. If Mr. Musk doesn't mind visiting such humble quarters. I'd be honored, Elon said, and meant it. The sincerity in his voice seemed to settle something for Naledi, who nodded with cautious acceptance as they prepared to leave the laboratory. Elon paused for one last look at the wall he had helped rebuild so many years ago. Imperfect, visible in its repair, but stronger for having been broken and remade. A fitting metaphor, he thought, for what had happened in this room, and for what might yet unfold from this unexpected reunion. Ready? Naledi asked, holding the door. Elon nodded, following Mr. Vermaak into the corridor. The three of them walked slowly, matching their pace to the old man's careful steps. They passed classrooms full of boys who would one day become men shaped by moments they couldn't yet recognize as pivotal, just as he had been shaped in these halls, by this man walking beside him now. The man who had looked at a 15-year-old boy standing amid the charred remains of his ambition and seen not delinquency to be punished, but potential worth salvaging. As they emerged into the afternoon sunshine, Elon felt oddly lighter than he had upon arriving, as if the acknowledgement of this long-carried debt had already begun to shift something fundamental within him. The past still waited, but now it beckoned rather than haunted. They turned toward the edge of campus where the old cottage stood, its garden visible even from a distance, a splash of color against the academic austerity of the main buildings. A place where stories might be exchanged freely without the weight of institutional walls. A place where perhaps gratitude might finally find its voice. The cottage sat at the edge of the school grounds, partially obscured by jacaranda trees, whose purple blooms created dappled shadows across the modest stone path leading to the front door. It was small but well-maintained, a remnant from an earlier era when faculty lived on campus, now preserved as part of the school's heritage and still serving its original purpose of housing staff. As they approached, Elon noticed the garden that surrounded the cottage, not the manicured landscaping of institutional grounds, but something more personal and carefully tended. Vegetables grew alongside flowers in a harmonious mingling that spoke of both practicality and beauty. A small wooden bench sat beneath the largest jacaranda, positioned to catch afternoon shade. My grandfather's domain, Naledi explained, following Elon's gaze. The school tried to send groundskeepers to maintain it after his first retirement. He sent them away. A hint of a smile softened her expression. Said they didn't understand that plants need conversation as much as water. Mr. Vermaak made a dismissive sound but didn't contradict her. He moved carefully along the path, his cane finding purchase between the stones with practiced precision. Elon found himself hovering nearby, ready to offer support that he suspected would be firmly declined. That bench, Mr. Vermaak said, nodding toward it, has heard more adolescent confessions than a Catholic priest. Students still find their way here, even though I'm long retired from official duties. They seek him out, Naledi added. Word passes down through the classes. If you're truly troubled, Mr. Vermaak has time to listen. The old man waved away the comment as if embarrassed by the attention. They simply know I have nowhere else to be. An old man with an open door isn't therapy, it's convenience. Elon observed the interplay between them. The granddaughter's quiet pride, the grandfather's self-effacement. There was something in their dynamic that felt both foreign and painfully familiar to him, the closeness of family without the edges of control or expectation that had characterized his own experience. Naledi unlocked the front door and led them into a small sitting room lined with bookshelves. The space was modest but thoughtfully arranged. Worn but quality furniture, walls covered with photographs and mementos, shelves overflowing with books sorted by some system decipherable only to their owner. Sunlight streamed through curtained windows, warming the wooden floors that creaked softly under their feet. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to the armchairs while she moved toward what appeared to be the kitchen. "I'll put the kettle on." Mr. Vermaak lowered himself carefully into a high-backed chair near the window, clearly his usual spot. Judging by the worn upholstery and the small table beside it stacked with books and reading glasses. Elon took the adjacent chair, noticing how out of place he felt in this humble domestic setting, so different from the sleek modernist spaces he typically inhabited. "Your home is lovely," he said, meaning it despite the simplicity that would have caused his interior designers to shudder. "It suits us," Vermaak replied. "Naledi moved back from Cape Town 5 years ago when my heart started giving trouble. She claims it was for a change of pace in her career, but we both know better." His eyes crinkled with affection. "She's given up much to be my keeper in old age." "I heard that," Naledi called from the kitchen, the clatter of cups accompanying her voice. "And I've told you I was tired of rare book collections that no one actually reads. Teenage boys who complain about reading Shakespeare are more honest than academics who pretend to enjoy obscure medieval texts." The familiarity of their banter created a comfortable atmosphere that gradually eased the tension Elon had carried since entering the school grounds yesterday. This wasn't a formal meeting or a strategic engagement. It was simply afternoon tea with an old teacher and his granddaughter. The realization allowed something to uncoil within him. Naledi returned with a tray bearing a teapot, cups, and a plate of simple shortbread cookies. As she poured, Elon noticed her hands, capable, ink-stained at the fingertips, a small burn scar across one knuckle. Working hands, not unlike his own beneath the corporate polish he'd acquired. "So," she said as she passed him a cup, "tell me about the other schools after Pretoria Boys High. Your biography mentions Canada, America." "Naledi," her grandfather admonished gently. "Our guest doesn't need to recite his CV." "It's fine," Elon assured him, accepting the tea. "After leaving here, I moved to Canada. My mother's family had connections there. Then Queen's University, briefly. Transferred to the University of Pennsylvania." He paused, sipping the strong rooibos. "Then Stanford for about 2 days before dropping out to start my first company." 2 days? Naledi raised an eyebrow. The program was excellent, but he hesitated, searching for words to explain a decision that had seemed both impulsive and inevitable at the time. The internet was happening. There was this sense that something was being built, a new world, and I wanted to help shape it rather than study it from within institutional walls. Mr. Vermaak nodded, his expression thoughtful. The builder's instinct. Some minds aren't content to analyze existing structures, they need to create new ones. "Exactly," Elon said, struck by the accurate assessment. "It wasn't that Stanford had nothing to teach me. It was that I couldn't wait to apply what I already knew." "That sounds familiar," the old man said with a small smile. "You were never one for patience in the classroom either." Elon acknowledged this with a self-deprecating nod. "I was probably a nightmare to teach." "Challenging," Vermaak corrected. "There's a difference. Nightmares you wake from with relief. Challenges push you to grow." He set his cup down carefully. "Speaking of challenges, did you know I was asked to retire 3 times before I finally stepped back from full-time duties?" 3 times? Elon asked, Sensing this was leading somewhere significant, the old man settled back in his chair, his eyes taking on the distant quality of someone revisiting well-worn memories. The first time was in 1999. The school board felt I was out of step with modern educational approaches. A faint smile crossed his face. They weren't wrong. I refused to reduce literature to bullet points or science to standardized answers. But you stayed, Elon prompted. A group of teachers petitioned for me to remain, and there was a boy that year. Brilliant, but troubled. His father had just been killed in a robbery gone wrong. He was unraveling with grief, becoming violent, self-destructive. Vermaak's voice softened. I recognized something in him. The same raw pain I'd seen in refugee children during my early teaching years. I couldn't leave while he was still falling. What happened to him? Elon asked. Dr. James Mutasa, trauma surgeon in Johannesburg now, Vermaak replied with quiet pride. He writes me every Christmas. Naledi rose and moved to one of the bookshelves, retrieving what appeared to be a photo album. She handed it to her grandfather, who opened it to a specific page and turned it toward Elon. A newspaper clipping showed a serious young black man in medical scrubs, the headline reading, Local Doctor Pioneers New Emergency Trauma Protocol. The second retirement attempt came in 2007. Vermaak continued, turning another page in the album. New headmaster, new vision. I was institutional resistance to progress, apparently. That headmaster lasted 18 months, Naledi interjected, dryly. Progress, it seems, required more than motivational posters and budget cuts. Mr. Vermaak gave her a mildly reproving look before continuing. I stayed for a set of twin boys that time. Brilliant mathematicians, both of them, but severely dyslexic. The system wanted to track them away from university preparation. I disagreed. Another page turn revealed two identical young men in graduation gowns grinning widely at the camera. Where are they now? Elon asked. Theoretical physics. One at Cambridge, one at MIT, Vermaak said. They still argue across continents about string theory, according to their mother. Elon studied the photographs, a pattern emerging that stirred something uncomfortable within him. Again and again, this man had fought to remain in position not for status or salary, but for students who needed an advocate, students with potential that might have been squandered without intervention, students like him. And the third time? He asked, his voice slightly rougher than before. 2014. I was well past standard retirement age by then. The board was apologetic but firm. Time for new blood, they said. And I was tired. Vermaak closed the album gently. But there was a girl. Brilliant, angry, gifted with numbers, but failing every class out of sheer defiance. Her mother had died. Her father remarried quickly. Classic displacement narrative. What made her different from the others? Elon asked. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She reminded me of my daughter, Naledi's mother. His voice softened. That same fire, that same hurt. I couldn't leave until I knew she'd find her way. A weighted silence fell. Elon glanced at Naledi, who was staring at her hands, something unspoken but palpable hanging in the air between her and her grandfather. She's at wits now, Naledi finally said. Top of her class in engineering, comes for dinner once a month. Elon set his cup down carefully, his mind processing what he was hearing, what he was witnessing. One life after another quietly salvaged by this man who had never sought recognition, who had fought to remain in position not for power, but for purpose. So many stories, he said quietly. So many lives changed. Not changed, Vermaak corrected, gently. Merely guided at critical junctures. The potential was always theirs. Naledi rose again, this time disappearing into another room. She returned moments later carrying a stack of small, leather-bound notebooks. Show him, Upa, she said, placing them on the small table between them. Mr. Vermaak hesitated, then selected one from the middle of the stack. Its leather was worn, The pages yellowed with age. He opened it carefully and handed it to Elon. Inside, in neat handwriting, were names. Dozens of them, organized by year with brief notations beside each. Gifted in language but needs confidence. Mathematical mind. Watch for depression. Brilliant but angry. Father issues. Potential leader if channeled away from troublemaking. Elon's throat tightened as his eyes found his own name, dated 1989. Exceptional scientific intuition, socially isolated, watches too much American television. Dangerous combination of brilliance and recklessness, needs focus, not restraint. Underline, watch closely. His name was indeed underlined. Twice. You kept notes on us, he said, looking up from the page. On those who seem to need extra attention, yes. Vermaak nodded. The ones walking the edge between greatness and self-destruction. Elon carefully closed the notebook, suddenly conscious of holding decades of observation and care in his hands, a physical record of lives in formation, of potential seen and nurtured. His own name among them, noted and underlined by this man who had perceived something worth salvaging amid the wreckage of a laboratory fire. That moment, Elon said, the words emerging before he could filter them, when you decided not to expel me, it changed everything. He paused, struggling to express a realization that felt both obvious and profound. If you'd done what was expected, what was justified, my entire trajectory would have been different. Mr. Vermaak accepted the notebook back, handling it with the care one might give a sacred text. Perhaps, he allowed. Or perhaps you would have found another path to similar ends. Determination like yours rarely accepts permanent defeat. No, Elon insisted, leaning forward. That's just it. Before that day, I'd never experienced redemption. The word felt strange on his tongue, loaded with connotations he didn't normally access. My father's approach to failure was absolute. Fall, short-faced consequences, no second chances. But you... He gestured to the notebooks, to the cottage, to the man himself. You showed me another model. That destruction could be answered with creation. That failure could become foundation rather than finale. Something shifted in Vermaak's expression, a softening, a recognition. That philosophy wasn't original to me, he said quietly. I grew up during apartheid, Elon. I saw how systems could crush human potential in the name of order and consequences. I watched brilliant minds relegated to servitude because of one arbitrary factor they couldn't control. His fingers traced the leather cover of the notebook. When I became an educator, I promised myself I would never be an instrument of that kind of destruction, no matter how it disguised itself as discipline or protocol. Naledi had settled on the arm of her grandfather's chair, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder in a gesture of support. Upa stayed because he knew what it meant to be seen, truly seen by one person who had power when you had none, she said. He did for others what had been done for him. Elon's gaze moved between them, sensing a deeper story. What do you mean? Mr. Vermaak sighed, placing the notebook on the stack with the others. My own education was nearly cut short. My family had limited means. But there was a headmaster, an Englishman who'd fought in the war and come back different, they said. He arranged a scholarship, mentored me, pushed me toward university when everyone said it was above my station. His eyes met Elon's directly. One person who refuses to accept artificial limitations can change a life. That headmaster changed mine. And perhaps in some small way, I changed yours. Not small, Elon said immediately, the words firm despite the emotion threatening his composure. Not small at all. A comfortable silence fell between them as the late afternoon sun slanted more directly through the windows, gilding the simple room with warm light. Outside, birds called to each other in the jacaranda trees, and somewhere in the distance, a school bell rang. It's strange, Elon finally said, to build rockets that might someday take humans to Mars, to create cars that change how people think about energy and transportation, and yet to realize that none of it might have happened without one conversation in a principal's office when I was 15. That's the nature of influence, Vermaak replied. We drop pebbles in ponds without knowing how far the ripples might travel, or which pebble matters most. Naledi added softly. Elon nodded, struck by the image. His gaze drifted to the photographs that lined the walls, generations of students, colleagues, family members. Lives touched, shaped, redirected. A legacy not of wealth or fame, but of impact. Human potential recognized and nurtured. And there, amid all his innovations and companies and public achievements, was a debt that could never be calculated in financial terms. A debt to this man who had seen beyond a schoolboy's reckless mistake to the builder beneath. Tell me, he said, turning back to Mr. Vermaak. What happened with the school library? When I was there yesterday, I noticed how outdated the facilities were. If the abrupt change of subject surprised Vermaak, he didn't show it. Budget constraints. The school board prioritizes science and technology facilities, understandably so in today's world. The library, he shrugged slightly. Books are seen as antiquated learning tools now. But you volunteer there anyway. Books held knowledge long before the internet existed, and they'll hold it long after whatever replaces the internet comes along, the old man said with quiet conviction. Besides, libraries are more than repositories for information. They're sanctuaries for minds that need space to grow. Naledi stood to collect their empty cups. It's a losing battle, but Upa refuses to surrender. Even as his eyesight fails, he still shelves books 3 days a week and argues against further budget cuts to the collection. There was equal measures of pride and worry in her voice. My eyesight is perfectly adequate, Vermaak protested mildly. For someone legally classified as partially blind, perhaps, she countered, disappearing into the kitchen. Elon watched their interaction, noting the blend of respect and protective concern in Naledi's manner. When she returned, he asked, How long have you been the school librarian? 5 years, she replied, settling back into her chair. I was a rare book conservator at the university library in Cape Town before that. Much more prestigious, much less meaningful. Her expression turned thoughtful. When Upa's health began to decline, it seemed like the right time for a change. She sacrificed a promising career to babysit an old man, Vermaak said, though his tone belied the harshness of the words. I exchanged one type of preservation for another, Naledi corrected gently. Old books are old wisdom. Both deserve care. Elon absorbed this exchange, feeling the weight of legacy and care that permeated the cottage, so different from the driven urgency that characterized his own world of innovation and disruption. Here was another model entirely, honoring what came before while nurturing what might come after. As the conversation continued, touching on changes at the school and in education more broadly, Elon found himself studying the modest room, the worn furniture, the carefully tended garden visible through the window. All of it spoke of limited means but unlimited care, resources allocated according to values, not excess. He thought of his own vast resources, his companies, his foundations. The contrast was stark and somehow uncomfortable. He had shaped industries, pushed boundaries, reimagined the future. But had he adequately honored the past that had made it possible? Mr. Vermaak, he began, then corrected himself. Anton. May I call you Anton? The old man nodded, seeming pleased by the familiarity. I'd like to do something. For the school. For the library. Elon chose his words carefully, aware that this moment required delicacy rather than the bold pronouncements he typically favored. Not as publicity or tax strategy, as acknowledgement. A shadow of wariness crossed Vermaak's face. The school certainly has needs, but not a donation, Elon clarified quickly. Something more meaningful. A tribute, perhaps, to the educators who shaped generations, who saw potential where others saw only problems. Naledi studied him with new interest, the last of her skepticism fading. What kind of tribute are you thinking? Elon leaned forward, an idea taking shape. Not the grand gesture of a billionaire philanthropist, but something that would honor the quiet, consistent impact of a man who had changed lives without fanfare or recognition. Something that reflects the values I learned here, he said. Something that honors quiet heroism over public achievement, that recognizes how a single act of faith in someone's potential can alter the course of countless lives. As the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the jacaranda trees, the three of them began to discuss possibilities, a conversation not of wealth deployment, but of meaningful legacy, of gratitude expressed not through magnitude, but through authenticity. And in that modest cottage, surrounded by the physical evidence of lives influenced rather than empires built, Elon felt something shift within himself, a recalibration of what truly constituted impact, and of how one properly honored those who had made it possible. Elon left the Vermaak cottage with his mind churning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the campus grounds as he walked, barely noticing the students who stared and whispered. He'd come to Pretoria Boys High seeking something intangible, closure perhaps, but was leaving with a mission. The administration building loomed ahead, its colonial architecture a reminder of South Africa's complex past. Inside, the cool air smelled of wood polish and old papers. Elon checked his watch. Dr. Khumalo had agreed to meet him at 4 o'clock, and it was 3 minutes till. The headmaster's office door stood open. Inside, Dr. Chepo Khumalo was reviewing documents at his desk, his tailored navy suit and horn-rimmed, glasses giving him the look of a diplomat rather than an educator. He looked up, his face brightening with recognition. "Mr. Musk," he said, rising to extend a hand. "An honor to have you back at Pretoria Boys. I trust your visit has been illuminating?" "More than I expected," Elon admitted, taking the offered seat. "I've spent some time with Mr. Vermaak. Anton is a living treasure," Khumalo said warmly, "though he insists on shelving books when he should be resting his hip. The man doesn't know how to retire properly." "That's why I'm here," Elon said, leaning forward. "I want to do something for him, something meaningful." Dr. Khumalo's smile was measured. "I'm listening." Elon pulled out his tablet and turned it toward Khumalo. With a few swipes, he revealed architectural renderings, sleek, modern, impressive. "The Anton Vermaak Center for Scientific Innovation," Elon said. 3 stories, state-of-the-art labs, research facilities that would rival MIT's undergraduate program, a makerspace with everything from 3D printers to plasma cutters. The renderings rotated on screen, glass and steel and light, a building that seemed to defy gravity. $14 million, Elon continued. "But the budget is flexible. I'd want it completed within 18 months. Dr. Khumalo studied the images without speaking. His fingers tapped lightly against the polished surface of his desk. Once, twice, 3 times, the silence stretched uncomfortably. "It's beautiful," he finally said, "visionary, like everything you design." "But?" Elon asked, recognizing the reservation in the headmaster's tone. Khumalo leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Musk, may I speak frankly? I've been headmaster here for 7 years. Before that, I taught mathematics at Cape Town University. I understand the value of modern facilities, but..." He gestured toward the window, where the school's stone building stood against the African sky. "Sometimes the grandest thing is restraint. This building, however magnificent, would overshadow not just our campus, but the man himself." Elon frowned. "I'm not following." Anton Vermaak has spent 57 years at this school, first as a teacher, then as principal, now as our volunteer librarian. Not once in those years has he sought recognition. Not once has he put his name on anything. Khumalo's voice softened. "To suddenly have the most prominent building on campus bearing his name, it might honor your intentions more than his nature." Elon's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected resistance. The tablet in his hand suddenly felt heavier. "With respect, Dr. Khumalo, I understand the value of Mr. Vermaak's contribution better than most. If anyone deserves recognition..." "Oh, I agree. Completely," Khumalo interrupted. "The question isn't whether he deserves recognition. It's what form that recognition should take." The door creaked open and both men turned. A wiry man in worn work clothes stood in the doorway with a mop and bucket. His weathered face broke into an apologetic grin. Sorry, sir, he said to Kumalo. Didn't know you had a meeting. No trouble, Loazi, Kumalo said. We can pick this up later. But the older man had already recognized Elon, his eyes widening. Mr. Musk, it's really you. I remember when you were just a skinny boy with your nose always in some science book. Elon studied him, memory slowly stirring. Mr. Mokoena, the groundskeeper? 42 years now, Loazi confirmed proudly. Not as young as I was when you were running around here, but the old knees still work. Mostly. Loazi remembers everyone, Kumalo explained. And everything. That I do, Loazi said, setting down his bucket. Especially things about Mr. Vermaak. He's talking to you about Mr. Vermaak, isn't he, sir? He asked Elon. He is, Elon confirmed. I want to honor him properly, but Dr. Kumalo seems to think my idea is excessive. Loazi's smile deepened. Ah, I see. Well, if you want to know how to honor Mr. Vermaak, maybe you should hear how he's honored others, eh? The things nobody sees. Such as? Elon asked. Loazi leaned against his mop. Such as the time in 1997 when Mandla Chabalala's father died suddenly. The boy was brilliant, tops in mathematics, destined for university. But with his father gone, the fees became impossible. His mother was working 2 jobs already. What happened? Elon asked. Mr. Vermaak paid the school fees himself. Every rand out of his own salary for 2 years. Loazi shook his head in memory. Nobody knew except me. I saw him writing the checks late at night in his office. And Mandla? Kumalo asked. Nuclear physicist now, working at Coburg. Has 3 children of his own. Loazi continued, warming to his audience. Then there was Peter van der Merwe in 2003. Dyslexia so severe he couldn't read at 13. Mr. Vermaak tutored him personally every day after school, never missing once. Even when Mrs. Vermaak was ill with pneumonia, he'd visit her in hospital, then come straight to school to help that boy. Did it work? Elon asked. Peter graduated, became a sculptor. Famous now in Europe, I hear. Loazi's stories flowed one after another, a tapestry of quiet interventions spanning decades. Some students Elon had known. Most came long after his time. But the pattern was unmistakable. Vermaak operating in the shadows, changing lives without recognition. And the library. Loazi added, his voice softening. When budget cuts came in 2008, they were going to close it, convert it to computer labs only. Mr. Vermaak fought the board for months. When they wouldn't budge, he offered to work there for free after retirement. A school without books is just a building, he told them. Elon sat back, absorbing this. Dr. Kumalo watched him silently, allowing the moment to unfold. He never told me any of this, Elon finally said. Of course not, Loazi replied. That's not his way. Elon looked down at the tablet in his hands, the gleaming building rotating silently on the screen. He pressed a button and the image vanished. Thank you, Mr. Mokoena, he said quietly. You've given me much to think about. After Loazi had excused himself, Elon and Dr. Kumalo sat in contemplative silence. The headmaster's office was growing, dim as the sun descended, but neither moved to turn on a light. What would you suggest? Elon finally asked. Kumalo considered this. Something that speaks his language, something that continues his work rather than simply commemorating it. Another silence fell between them, more comfortable this time. Outside, the sounds of students had faded. Classes were finished for the day. Through the window, Elon could see a lone figure crossing the quad. Naledi walking with quick, purposeful strides toward the library. The library, Elon said suddenly. That's where it starts. I'm listening, Kumalo said, leaning forward. Not a new building, a renovation of what's already there. Subtle improvements, better lighting, climate control for the rare books, new shelving systems, comfortable reading areas, nothing flashy, just improvements that make the space more functional, more inviting. Kumalo nodded, encouraging him to continue. And a scholarship fund, Elon added. The idea's flowing now. Focused on students who show potential but face obstacles. Financial need? learning differences, difficult home situations. The kinds of students Vermaak seems to have championed. Anonymous? Kumalo asked. Initially, Elon confirmed. Let him see the fruits before he knows the source. And the library, renovation? Same approach, it happens but without fanfare. We simply ensure it gets done. Kumalo smiled, satisfied. Now you're speaking his language, Mr. Musk. Elon rose to leave, but hesitated at the door. There's one more thing. Could you arrange a school assembly? Something that feels routine? Founders' Day, perhaps? In 2 days' time, Kumalo suggested. That's actually when we recognize the school's establishment. Perfect, Elon said. And ensure Mr. Vermaak attends. Tell him it's tradition for former principals to be present. It is tradition, Kumalo confirmed, though Anton often tries to avoid the spotlight. This time, don't let him. As Elon left the administration building, the campus had fallen quiet. The sun was setting, painting the sandstone buildings in shades of amber and gold. He felt lighter somehow, unburdened. The path forward was clear. He found Naledi in the library, exactly where he expected. She was alone, cataloging a stack of donated books. The space around her was dim, illuminated only by a desk lamp that cast long shadows across the shelves. Mr. Musk, she acknowledged, not looking up from her work. I didn't expect to see you again today. I need your help, he said simply. Now she did look up, curiosity overcoming her reserve. With what? A tribute. For your grandfather. He explained his revised plan, the library renovation, the scholarship fund, the assembly. As he spoke, her initial skepticism gave way to cautious interest. So you're not putting his name on a building? She asked. No. That would be about me, not him. She nodded, appreciating this insight. The library renovation makes sense. This place is falling apart. The humidity is destroying the older collections. And the lighting. She gestured at the shadows around them. Exactly, Elon agreed. But I need your guidance. What would make this space better without changing its character? What would your grandfather value most? Naledi set down her cataloging stamps and rose from her desk. She moved among the shelves with the familiarity of someone navigating their own home. Better preservation systems for the archives. The colonial era, documents are deteriorating. Climate control throughout, not just in the rare books room. She continued through the space, pointing out needs. New reading tables to replace the scarred ones. Better chairs that wouldn't strain aging backs. Improved access for students with mobility issues. Elon followed, taking notes on his phone, and, this section, she said, gesturing to a corner near the windows. This could be a proper research area. Something quiet, set apart. Grandfather often tutors students here, but the space is so cramped. A room within the library, Elon mused. Yes, something intimate but functional. Elon studied the space, mentally reconfiguring it. I'll have architects draw up plans immediately. They can work through the night. But I'll need you to review them to ensure they honor the spirit of this place. And the scholarship? She asked. That's where I'll need your input most. You know the kinds of students your grandfather has championed over the years. Together we can craft criteria that continue his work. She considered this, arms crossed. And all of this will be revealed at the assembly? Yes, in 2 days. That's very little time. I work best under tight deadlines. A hint of a smile crossed her face. So I've read. They agreed to meet early the next morning to review the architectural plans and draft the scholarship criteria. As Elon turned to leave, Naledi called after him. Mr. Musk? Why are you doing this? Really? He paused, considering the question with unexpected gravity. Because some debts can't be repaid with money alone, and because I've built rockets and electric cars and solar networks, but I've never properly honored the man who made all of it possible. By not expelling you? She asked. By seeing something in me worth saving, he corrected. Even when I couldn't see it myself. The next morning dawned clear and warm. Elon met with Naledi in a quiet corner of the campus coffee shop. away from curious students. The architectural plans had arrived overnight, detailed renderings showing subtle transformations of the existing library space, new lighting systems that mimicked natural daylight, climate control hidden within the existing structure, a research area carved from the underutilized corner, intimate, wood-paneled, with built-in shelving and comfortable seating. It's perfect, Naledi said, studying the plans. Modern functionality without sacrificing character. And this, Elon said, pointing to a discrete section of wall near the entrance. Space for a small dedication plaque. Nothing ostentatious. They spent the next hour drafting the scholarship criteria. It would support 5 students annually. Those showing academic potential combined with financial need, learning differences, or difficult home situations. The recipients would receive not just financial support, but mentoring from alumni and faculty. He'll appreciate this more than any building, Naledi said, reviewing their work. That's what I'm hoping. The construction crew arrived that afternoon, a small team, working quickly and quietly during hours when the library was closed. Naledi oversaw their work, ensuring every detail matched their vision. New lighting systems were installed, climate control units hidden within the existing architecture. The research corner began to take shape, intimate, thoughtful, designed for serious study and quiet mentorship. Elon spent the day finalizing the scholarship fund, working remotely with his financial team to establish the endowment. By evening, the legal framework was in place, the Anton Vermaak Scholarship for Exceptional Promise. It would be funded in perpetuity, capable of supporting generations of students. That night, Elon stayed late at the library, watching as the transformation took shape. The crews worked through the darkness, guided by temporary lights. The space was evolving, not into something new, but into a better version of what it had always been. Lwazi joined him around midnight, bringing coffee and paper cups. You've chosen wisely, the old groundskeeper said, surveying the work. This is a tribute he'll understand. I hope so, Elon replied. The trick with Mr. Vermaak, Lwazi continued, is that he never needed others to see his good works. He just needed to know they were done. I was the opposite, Elon admitted. I needed the world to see everything I built. Different men, different paths. Lwazi sipped his coffee. But perhaps not so different in what matters. The library renovation continued throughout the night and into the next day. By afternoon, it was complete. Subtle yet profound changes that honored the space's history while securing its future. The research corner, which they had begun calling the Vermaak room in their planning, was particularly striking. Warm, wood paneling, comfortable chairs, built-in shelving, and excellent lighting created a haven for serious study. The dedication plaque remained covered, waiting for the moment of revelation. Founders' Day dawned bright and clear. Students gathered in the assembly hall dressed in their formal uniforms. Faculty sat in rows near the front, Dr. Kumalo at their center, and there, in a chair of honor, sat Mr. Vermaak, slightly uncomfortable with the attention but present, as requested. When Elon stepped onto the stage, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Most of the students knew he was visiting, but his appearance at a school function was unexpected. He approached the microphone, oddly nervous despite having addressed much larger crowds throughout his career. Good morning, he began. For those who don't know me, I'm a former student of this school, class of 1989. He paused, looking out at the sea of young faces. Among them sat Naledi, watching intently. Most of you know me for what I've built since leaving here. Electric cars, rockets, solar energy networks. From the outside, these look like triumphs of technology, but they began as something else, failures. The hall grew quieter. Even the restless students sensed something important was unfolding. When I was 15 years old, Elon continued, I nearly burned down the science lab, a failed experiment, a fire, the kind of mistake that should have ended my education here. He looked directly at Mr. Vermaak, whose expression had grown somber in memory. But it didn't, because a wise principal understood something crucial, that sometimes our greatest potential lies in our most spectacular failures. That punishment, isn't always the answer. That redemption can be a more powerful teacher than exile. Elon stepped away from the microphone, moving to the edge of the stage where he could see Mr. Vermaak more clearly. Mr. Vermaak, I never properly thanked you. Not just for letting me stay, but for teaching me that failure could be foundation. That I could rebuild what I had broken. It's a lesson that has shaped everything I've done since. He gestured, and, from the side entrance, Dr. Kumalo approached with a small wooden box. Today, we honor not just the founding of this school, but a man who has embodied its highest values for nearly 6 decades. A man who has touched countless lives, often, invisibly, without recognition or reward. Dr. Kumalo opened the box, revealing a small brass key. This key opens a newly renovated space within our library, a room for research, for mentorship, for the kind of quiet guidance that changes lives. We're calling it simply the Vermaak Room. A projection appeared on the screen behind Elon, images of the transformed library space, the new lighting, the preserved collections, and finally the intimate research corner with its warm wood and comfortable seating. And alongside this physical space, Elon continued, we're establishing the Anton Vermaak Scholarship for Exceptional Promise. It will support students who show great potential combined with great need. The very students Mr. Vermaak has championed throughout his career. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd. On stage, Dr. Kumalo approached Mr. Vermaak, offering him the small brass key. The old man took it with trembling hands, visibly moved. Anton, Elon said, using his first name publicly for the first time. This is not a grand gesture. It's a quiet one, befitting the man you are. But it will ensure that your work continues, that future generations receive the same chance you gave me. The chance to fail, to learn, to rebuild, to become something more than our mistakes. Mr. Vermaak rose slowly to his feet, supported by his cane. The entire assembly stood with him, applauding, first the faculty, then the students, until the hall thundered with recognition. In that moment, watching the old man's face transform with emotion, Elon felt something settle within himself. A debt acknowledged. A circle completed. Not with grandeur or spectacle, but with understanding. The tribute was written not in gleaming steel and glass, but in something more enduring. Stone and silence, memory, and continuation, in the language of the man himself. The assembly hall emptied gradually, students filing out row by row while casting curious glances back at the stage. The formal portion of Founders' Day had concluded, but the emotional resonance lingered in the air like the last notes of a symphony. Mr. Vermaak remained seated, the small brass key clutched in his weathered hand, his eyes fixed on some distant point only he could see. Elon stood nearby, giving the old man space to process what had just occurred. He felt strangely light, as if some invisible weight had been lifted from him, a debt acknowledged, if not fully repaid. Naledi approached her grandfather, kneeling beside his chair, their hands intertwining. No words were necessary. The emotion flowing between them was eloquent enough. Dr. Kumalo stepped to Elon's side, speaking quietly. That was more than I expected. For both of us, Elon admitted. The board has approved your proposal for the scholarship fund. We'll begin accepting applications next term. Elon nodded, watching Mr. Vermaak and Naledi. Make sure the first recipients meet him personally, that's important. Of course. Students continued to hover near the exits, phones discreetly aimed toward Elon. He was accustomed to being photographed, recorded, documented, his every public moment preserved and dissected. But today felt different, more authentic. The whispers and pointing didn't bother him as they sometimes did. Shall we proceed to the library? Dr. Kumalo suggested. The space awaits its formal introduction. Elon hesitated. Give him a moment. Mr. Vermaak was rising slowly from his chair now, supported by Naledi and his cane. His face, so often composed and dignified, showed raw emotion, a complex blend of surprise, gratitude, and something deeper. Perhaps the recognition of a life's work acknowledged not in grand monuments but in its true essence. Mr. Vermaak, Elon said, approaching, I hope this meets with your approval. The old man looked up, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You did all this? In secret? With considerable help. Elon gestured toward Naledi, who smiled. The traitor, Mr. Vermaak said, but the affection in his voice belied any actual accusation. Are you up for a short walk to the library? Elon asked. There's something I'd like you to see. The small procession moved slowly across the campus grounds, Mr. Vermaak leaning on his cane, Naledi close beside him, Dr. Kumalo leading the way, and Elon walking slightly apart, sensing the need for family space. Students parted respectfully, as they passed, their usual boisterousness subdued by the evident significance of the moment. The library stood solid and timeless against the blue South African sky. From the outside, nothing appeared changed. The same weathered sandstone, the same arched windows that had admitted light for generations of scholars. But inside, transformation awaited. At the entrance, Dr. Kumalo paused. Mr. Vermaak, would you do us the honor? He gestured toward the door. With a slightly trembling hand, Mr. Vermaak inserted the brass key. The lock turned with a solid click, and the heavy door swung open. Light spilled out, not the dim, yellowed illumination of before, but clean, bright light that mimicked natural sunshine. It revealed a space both familiar and renewed. Oh my, Mr. Vermaak whispered, stepping inside. The library's bones remained, untouched, the same layout, the same shelves reaching toward high ceilings. But everything else had been subtly enhanced. New lighting banished the shadows that had plagued readers for decades. Climate control hummed quietly, preserving rare volumes that had been slowly deteriorating. The scarred tables had been replaced with ones of similar design but unmarked wood. Comfortable chairs invited longer study. The collections, Mr. Vermaak said, moving toward a glass case where fragile colonial-era documents were displayed. They're properly preserved now. Climate-controlled cases, Naledi explained. Museum quality. The humidity and temperature are regulated automatically. Mr. Vermaak moved through the space with increasing wonder, his hand trailing along shelves, touching tables, examining the subtle changes that honored the library's character while securing its future. Students and faculty who had followed their procession from the assembly hall gathered at the entrance, watching respectfully. And this, Elon said, guiding Mr. Vermaak toward the corner that had been transformed most dramatically. This is what the key truly opens. A beautiful wooden door, newly installed but designed to match the library's existing architecture, stood before them. A small brass plaque beside it remained covered. Mr. Vermaak inserted the key, turned it, and pushed the door open. The Vermaak room revealed itself, an intimate space of warm wood and gentle light. Built-in shelving lined the walls already, filled with carefully selected volumes. A large table of polished teak dominated the center, surrounded by comfortable chairs. A smaller desk stood in one corner, positioned to catch natural light from the tall windows. Everything spoke of scholarship, mentorship, quiet conversation, and the transmission of knowledge. This is, Mr. Vermaak began, but words failed him. A space for the kind of guidance you've always provided, Elon said quietly. For tutoring, for research, for the conversations that change lives. For second chances, Mr. Vermaak added, understanding blooming in his eyes. Yes, exactly that. Mr. Vermaak moved to one of the chairs and lowered himself into it, his hand caressing the smooth wood of the table before him. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence held no awkwardness. It was the pause between movements in a concerto, necessary and rich with meaning. May I? Elon asked, gesturing to the covered plaque by the door. Mr. Vermaak nodded, and Elon removed the cloth covering. The brass gleamed in the light, its inscription simple and dignified. The Vermaak room where guidance meets potential, where failure transforms to foundation, founded 2025. No mention of Elon's name, no corporate sponsorship. Nothing but recognition of the space's purpose and the man who had embodied those principles for nearly 6 decades. "It's perfect," Naledi whispered, standing beside Elon. Mr. Vermaak rose from his chair, moving with sudden purpose toward the bookshelves. His fingers traced the spines, literature, history, science, mathematics, until they stopped at a slim volume bound in faded green cloth. He pulled it from the shelf. "My first year teaching here," he said. "I found a student reading this instead of his assigned texts, Byron. The boy was failing mathematics but could quote The Prisoner of Chillon from memory." A smile crossed his face. "I made him a deal. For every mathematics assignment completed, he could spend an hour discussing poetry with me after school." "Did it work?" Elon asked. He graduated with honors in both subjects, became a civil engineer, who published verse in literary journals. Mr. Vermaak replaced the book carefully. "This room, it understands that education isn't just curriculum, it's connection." The gathering at the door had grown. Students pressed forward, curiosity overcoming their usual reserve. Faculty members stood among them, many with expressions of quiet recognition. They knew firsthand the impact of Anton Vermaak's mentorship. "The scholarship," Dr. Kumalo said, stepping forward with a leather portfolio. "Perhaps you'd like to review the criteria?" Mr. Vermaak accepted the folder, opening it on the table before him. As he read through the carefully crafted guidelines, his expression shifted from curiosity to deep understanding. The Anton Vermaak Scholarship for Exceptional Promise, 5 students annually, selected not just for academic potential, but for resilience in the face of obstacles. Financial support through graduation, mentorship from faculty and alumni, a chance not just to attend the school, but to thrive there. "This is," he began, then cleared his throat. "This is everything I've tried to do, formalized and funded." "Yes," Elon said simply. "That's exactly what it is." "The first selections will be made for next term," Dr. Kumalo explained. "We've already identified several candidates who embody the spirit of the scholarship. I'd like to meet them," Mr. Vermaak said immediately. "That's built into the process," Naledi assured him. "Each recipient will have regular meetings with you, in this room, as long as you're willing." "Willing?" Mr. Vermaak's voice cracked slightly. "It would be my honor." The atmosphere in the room had shifted subtly. What had begun as a tribute, an acknowledgement of past impact, was transforming into something forward-looking. Not an end point, but a continuation. A new chapter with deeper resources and formal recognition of work that had previously existed in the shadows. "There's one more thing," Elon said, signaling to Dr. Kumalo, who produced a small wooden box from his jacket pocket. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, lay a simple medal on a ribbon, the school's highest honor, rarely bestowed and never taken lightly. Mr. Vermaak stared at it momentarily speechless. "The Board of Governors unanimously approved it last night," Dr. Kumalo explained. "The Pretoria Boys' High Medal for Distinguished Service, only the 8th awarded in our 117-year history." Elon lifted the medal from its box. "May I?" Mr. Vermaak bowed his head slightly in assent, and Elon placed the ribbon around his neck, the medal resting against his chest. The gathered crowd applauded, softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm until the sound filled the library and spilled out onto the campus grounds. In that moment, watching the emotion play across Mr. Vermaak's face, Elon felt the full circle of return. He had come to Pretoria seeking something intangible, closure, perspective, a brief pause in the relentless forward momentum of his life. He was leaving with something else: connection, recognition of roots, the acknowledgement of unseen influence. Mr. Vermaak straightened his shoulders, the metal gleaming against his simple button-down shirt. He looked around the room, at the students watching from the doorway, at his granddaughter standing proud beside him, at the space created in his name. And something in his expression shifted from surprise to acceptance. Not pride exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived finally being recognized. "Thank you," he said simply. his voice barely carrying over the continued applause. But Elon heard him and nodded in acknowledgement. The formal ceremony complete, the gathering began to disperse. Students and faculty offered congratulations to Mr. Vermaak before drifting away. Dr. Kumalo excused himself to attend to other founders' day responsibilities. Slowly, the library emptied until only Elon, Naledi, and Mr. Vermaak remained in the newly created room. "Would you like a moment alone?" Naledi asked her grandfather. "No," he said, settling back into one of the chairs. "But perhaps some tea? It feels like an occasion for tea." She smiled, understanding the request for what it was, a chance for the two men to speak privately. "I'll be a few minutes. The kitchen is on the other side of campus." After she left, silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken thoughts. Mr. Vermaak ran his fingers over the smooth wood of the table, tracing its grain. Elon stood by the window, looking out at the campus where he had spent formative years. "You know," Mr. Vermaak finally said, "when you were a student here, I never imagined this." "The billionaire part?" Elon asked with a slight smile. No, the fact that you remembered, that it mattered to you." The old man looked up, his eyes keen. "So many pass through these halls. They grow up, build lives, forget. Even the most successful rarely look back with such specificity of gratitude." Elon turned from the window. "I've had a complicated relationship with my past. But that moment in your office, when you offered rebuilding instead of exile, it stayed with me, even when I couldn't articulate why. And now I understand that it shaped everything that followed. Not just because it kept me in school, but because it taught me that destruction can be followed by creation, that broken things can be made whole again, sometimes stronger than before." Elon moved to the chair opposite Mr. Vermaak and sat down. "In every company I've built, in every failure I've faced, that lesson has been there, guiding me." Mr. Vermaak nodded slowly. "Teaching is a curious profession. You plant seeds without ever knowing which will take root, which will bear fruit." He touched the metal at his chest. "This recognition, it means more than I can express. Not for the honor itself, but for the knowledge that something I did mattered so deeply." "It did," Elon confirmed. "More than I realized until I came back here." Outside, the afternoon light was shifting, casting long shadows across the campus quadrangle. Students moved between buildings, their uniforms crisp against the green grass. Life continuing in its ordered patterns, young minds being shaped in ways they might not appreciate for decades. "May I ask you something personal?" Mr. Vermaak said. "Of course. With all you've built, all you've achieved, are you satisfied? Does it feel like enough?" The question caught Elon off guard, its directness cutting through the polite veneer of the day. He considered deflecting, offering some practiced response about continued innovation and future goals. But the honesty of the moment demanded more. "No," he admitted, "it never does. There's always the next project, the next problem to solve. Mars to reach, climate change to address, AI to secure." He paused. "I'm not sure I know how to be satisfied, in the conventional sense. And yet you took the time to come back here, to honor an old man most of the world has never heard of. Because this matters differently," Elon said, realizing the truth of it as he spoke. "What I build out there," he gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the world beyond. "It's about the future, about possibility. This," he touched the table between them, "is about acknowledgement, about seeing clearly what already exists." Mr. Vermaak smiled, a gentle expression that creased the corners of his eyes. "Perhaps that's the final lesson then, that looking back with gratitude is as important as looking forward with vision." The door opened, and Naledi returned with a tray holding a teapot and cups. She set it on the table between them. "Perfect timing," Mr. Vermaak said. "We were just discussing the virtue of acknowledgement." She poured the tea, a fragrant salon that steamed in the cool air of the room. "And did you reach any conclusions?" "That it matters," Elon said, accepting a cup. more than I understood before coming here. They drank their tea in companionable silence, the late afternoon light filtering through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Outside, the sound of students had faded as classes ended for the day. The campus settled into the quiet that preceded evening. "What happens now?" Naledi asked, breaking the silence. "After the scholarships begin? After the room is in use?" "Life continues," Mr. Vermaak said simply. "Books are read, minds are shaped, the work goes on." Elon nodded, understanding the profound humility in that statement. For all the recognition of the day, Anton Vermaak remained focused not on accolades but on purpose, the quiet, continuing work of education and mentorship. As they finished their tea, Naledi gathered the cups onto the tray. "I need to check on a few things in the main library. Will you be all right for a few minutes, Upa?" "Perfectly fine," Mr. Vermaak assured her. "Mr. Musk and I can manage without supervision for a short while." After she left, Mr. Vermaak rose from his chair with some effort. He moved to a small side table where his worn leather satchel rested. From it, he withdrew a package wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with string. "I've been carrying this since I heard you were visiting," he said, returning to the table. Waiting for the right moment, he placed the package before Elon. "This belongs to you now." Elon looked at the package with curiosity. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Carefully, Elon untied the string and unwrapped the paper. Inside lay a notebook, leather-bound, well-worn, its pages yellowed with age. He opened it to find handwritten entries, dates spanning decades, names of students followed by observations, insights, concerns. "My personal record," Mr. Vermaak explained. "Not the official one. That belongs to the school. This is where I kept the notes that mattered most to me. The students who needed something beyond ordinary teaching." Elon turned pages slowly, glimpsing lives documented in brief, insightful entries, troubled students, brilliant ones, those facing obstacles both external and internal. Mr. Vermaak's careful observations revealed not just academic concerns, but deep empathy for young minds in formation. "I can't accept this," Elon said, closing the book gently. "These are your private thoughts. And now they're your inheritance," Mr. Vermaak insisted. "Look at page 47. Elon opened the notebook again, finding the indicated page. There, in neat handwriting dated June 1989, he found his own name. Elon Musk. 15. Incident with electrical fire in Lab 3. Board recommends expulsion. Boy shows exceptional scientific intuition, but dangerous lack of oversight. Decision: rehabilitation through rebuilding. Will supervise personally. Note: watch this one closely. The fire in his mind burns hotter than any he could set in a lab. Potential: unbounded if properly channeled. The boy who might set stars on fire. Elon stared at the words, written when he was just a troubled teenager with too many ideas and too little patience. Words that had seen something in him beyond the immediate crisis. Words that had changed the course of his life. "You saw all that?" "Even then?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I saw possibility," Mr. Vermaak corrected. "The actual path was yours to forge." Elon closed the notebook carefully, running his hand over its worn cover. "Why give this to me?" "Because you understand its value now," Mr. Vermaak said simply. "And because there's a page marked for you to continue." At the back of the notebook, a ribbon marked a blank page. The implication was clear. The record was not just of past students, but an invitation to continue the practice, to see potential in crisis, to offer second chances, to document the unseen struggles and triumphs that shape young lives. "I don't teach," Elon said. "Neither do I anymore," Mr. Vermaak replied with a smile. "But we both shape futures in our different ways." The gift was not just a memento, but a passing of responsibility, an invitation to carry forward a particular kind of seeing, a particular kind of care, not in a classroom perhaps, but in the world Elon had built and continued to shape. "Thank you," he said. the words inadequate but deeply meant. I'll treasure this. Do more than treasure it, Mr. Vermaak said. Use it. Remember what it represents. The practice of seeing potential where others see only problems. Naledi returned, noticing the notebook now resting before Elon. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition, but she said nothing, respecting the significance of the moment. It's getting late, she said instead. Upa, we should get you home before it gets too cool. As they prepared to leave the library, the day's emotion visible in their faces, Elon looked back at the room that would carry Mr. Vermaak's name forward. The brass plaque caught the last light of day, gleaming like a promise. The scholarship papers lay on the table, ready to change lives that hadn't yet intersected with this place. The notebook in his hands connected past and future, a record of lives touched and a template for continuing that impact. Outside, the campus had settled into evening quiet. A few lights burned in dormitory windows. The ancient stone buildings stood solid against the darkening sky, unchanged in appearance but continually renewed in purpose. Will you visit again? Mr. Vermaak asked as they parted at the school gates. Before another 30 years pass? I will, Elon promised, the notebook secure under his arm. And sooner rather than later. They shook hands, the gesture formal, but the emotion behind it profound. No further words were necessary. The debt had been acknowledged, the gratitude expressed. The circle, if not completed, had at least been recognized in its true shape and significance. As Elon watched Mr. Vermaak and Naledi walk slowly toward their cottage, the old man leaning on both his cane and his granddaughter's arm, he felt an unfamiliar sensation, not the restless drive that typically propelled him forward, but a moment of quiet recognition, of presence in the now rather than projection into the future. The notebook was heavy in his hands, not with physical weight but with the responsibility it represented. To see potential, to offer second chances, to recognize that behind every innovation, every company, every rocket launched toward Mars, stood people whose lives could be transformed by small, timely acts of understanding. It was, perhaps, the most important lesson he had brought back from his return to Pretoria Boys High School, that alongside his public legacy of technological transformation existed a responsibility for human transformation. One person at a time, one second chance at a time, like the one he had been given decades ago that had changed everything. The evening sun cast long shadows across Mr. Vermaak's garden as Elon carefully closed the leather-bound notebook, his fingers lingering on its worn cover. The sounds of the Founders' Day celebration had faded hours ago, leaving only the gentle rustle of jacaranda leaves and the distant calls of Hadada ibises returning to roost. The boy who might set stars on fire, Elon repeated softly, his voice barely audible above the evening breeze. The words from the dog-eared page still burned in his mind, not with the fierce intensity of ambition that had driven him for decades, but with the warm glow of recognition, of being truly seen. Mr. Vermaak sat across from him in a weathered garden chair, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Though his body had grown frail with age, his eyes remained clear and penetrating as they had been all those years ago when he'd looked at a terrified 15-year-old standing before him reeking of smoke and shame. I never understood until now, Elon said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. I thought you were just being merciful that day. But you weren't just giving me a second chance, you were investing in who I could become. Mr. Vermaak smiled faintly. Not everyone sees the difference between punishment and discipline. Punishment looks backward, at what was done wrong. Discipline looks forward, at what can be made right. He gestured to the notebook. That's why I kept these records, not to document infractions, but to map potential. Elon opened the notebook again, carefully turning its yellowed pages. Names upon names, hundreds of boys who had sat before this man over 4 decades. Brief, incisive observations, moments of intervention, small adjustments to trajectories that, over time and distance, would lead to vastly different destinations. How did you know? Elon asked. About me, I mean, that I would... He faltered, uncomfortable with articulating his own success. That you would set stars on fire? Mr. Vermaak finished for him, amusement crinkling the corners of his eyes. I didn't know what you would do, Elon. I only knew what you could do given the chance. The fire that got you into trouble that day, it wasn't carelessness. It was impatience. The circuit wasn't working fast enough for your mind. He tapped his temple. You weren't trying to destroy. You were trying to create something that worked at the speed of your thoughts. A small garden light flickered on automatically as dusk deepened around them. In its warm glow, Elon noticed how the years had etched themselves into his former headmaster's face. Each line a testimony to concerns carried, decisions weighed, lives touched. The scholarship program, Mr. Vermaak said suddenly. It's more than I ever imagined possible. It's less than you deserve, Elon replied. I've been thinking about expanding it, not just here, but to schools across South Africa. Places where students might never get a second chance like I did. Mr. Vermaak nodded slowly. That would be quite something. A slight tremor had entered his voice, and he reached for the glass of water on the small table between them. Elon handed it to him, noticing the slight shake in the old man's hand as he took it. Are you feeling all right, sir? The formality slipped out automatically, a remnant of his schoolboy days. Just tired, Elon. The day has been full. Mr. Vermaak set down his glass. But a good kind of tired. The kind that comes from seeing a harvest you weren't sure would ever come. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Pretoria's lights were beginning to blur the horizon. But here, in this small garden sanctuary, the stars still commanded attention. Do you remember what you told me that day? Elon asked. After I finished rebuilding the lab wall, Mr. Vermaak's brow furrowed slightly. I told many boys many things over many years, Elon. I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific. You said, the world doesn't lack for brilliance, Mr. Musk. It lacks for brilliance properly directed. Elon's perfect recall surprised even himself. The words had been buried deep, yet they surfaced now with crystal clarity. You told me that intelligence without purpose was just noise. Mr. Vermaak's eyes widened slightly in recognition. I did say that, didn't I? Though I doubt I phrased it quite so eloquently. You did. Exactly that way. Elon's voice softened. I've thought about those words more times than I can count. When I was deciding whether to keep pushing with Tesla, with SpaceX, when everything seemed on the verge of collapse. That idea that brilliance needs direction. It's guided more of my life than I realized until coming back here. Mr. Vermaak reached across and placed his hand atop the notebook that now rested on Elon's knee. Then I'm glad I said it. And gladder still that you heard it. He leaned back in his chair, seemingly gathering his thoughts. You know, Elon, I've watched your career from afar. The electric cars, the rockets, the tunnels and trains and all the rest. Impressive achievements, certainly. But do you know what impressed me most about today? Elon waited, curious. That you chose to honor not what I said, but what I did. Mr. Vermaak gestured vaguely in the direction of the school. The library renovation, the scholarship. They're not monuments to words. They're continuations of action, of quiet work. A smile crossed his face. You've learned the most important lesson of all. That true influence outlasts us not through what we build, but through who we build. The old man's words settled between them like a benediction. Elon felt something shift within him, a subtle realignment of priorities that had been gradually taking shape throughout this visit. There's a blank page, Elon said finally, tapping the notebook. At the end, you said it was marked for me. Ah, yes. Mr. Vermaak nodded. That page is yours to fill. With what? With names, Elon. With observations. With potential fires that need tending, not extinguishing. Mr. Vermaak's voice grew soft but urgent. You've built machines that can take humanity to Mars. Perhaps now it's time to build humans who can do the same. Elon stared at the empty page, feeling simultaneously the weight of responsibility and the lightness of possibility. I'm not a teacher. None of us is. Until we teach, Mr. Vermaak replied simply. I wasn't born knowing how to see what others missed in you. I learned it through trial and error and paying attention, through believing that redemption is always possible. He paused, his breathing slightly labored. The question isn't whether you can teach, Elon. It's whether you're willing to try. As night fully descended on the garden, Naledi appeared at the back door, concern etched on her face. "Grandpa, it's getting chilly out here. You should come inside." Mr. Vermaak nodded, attempting to rise from his chair. Elon quickly moved to help him, surprised at how light the old man felt beneath his supporting arm. Age had whittled away at his physical presence, yet somehow he seemed more substantial than ever. At the doorway, Mr. Vermaak paused and turned to Elon. "Will you be leaving tomorrow?" "Yes. Early flight to Cape Town, then back to Texas." Mr. Vermaak nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Then I'm glad we had this time." He extended his hand and Elon took it, not in a perfunctory handshake, but in a grip that communicated across the decades. "Thank you," Elon said, the words utterly inadequate, yet all he had. "For everything." "No, Elon." Mr. Vermaak's smile was peaceful, complete. "Thank you for coming back, for remembering, most of all for understanding." As Elon walked back to his hotel that night, the notebook tucked securely under his arm, he felt lighter than he had in years. The stars overhead seemed brighter, more immediate than they had even in the dark Texas skies above his launch facilities. He found himself planning, not rocket trajectories or production quotas, but how to begin filling that blank page. Names were already forming in his mind. Young engineers at his companies who showed promise beyond their technical skills. Students he might reach through expanded scholarship programs. Perhaps even his own children, who deserved the kind of attention to their individual sparks that Mr. Vermaak had shown to his. He slept deeply that night, without the restless energy that usually drove him to wake before dawn. When his phone rang at 6:47 a.m., he was momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar sound of peaceful rest being interrupted. It was Naledi. "Mr. Musk." Her voice was steady but thin, stretched across emotion. "I thought you should know. My grandfather passed away in his sleep last night." The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through Elon's consciousness. He sat up, suddenly alert. "I'm sorry," he said automatically. Then with growing realization, "I'm so very sorry, Naledi." The doctor said it was peaceful. His heart simply finished its work. There was a pause. "He looked content when I found him. The notebook was missing from his desk. I thought you might have it." "Yes," Elon confirmed, glancing at where it lay on the hotel nightstand. "He gave it to me yesterday evening." "He must have known then," Naledi said softly. "He's been organizing his things for weeks now, though he wouldn't admit that's what he was doing. Finding the right homes for what mattered to him." The implication settled over Elon like a mantle. Not a burden, but a responsibility freely given and accepted. "When is the funeral?" he asked. "Day after tomorrow. Small service at the school chapel, then burial at the cemetery nearby. Family only," he always said. "I understand." Elon hesitated. "Would it be all right if I visited the library once more before I leave? There's something I'd like to do." "Of course," Naledi replied. "I'm there now, actually. Come whenever you're ready." An hour later, Elon stood in the newly renovated Vermaak room of the school library. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes that danced in the still air. Naledi sat at the main desk, paperwork spread before her, her eyes red-rimmed but composed. "He loved what you did with this space," she said as Elon approached. "Especially that you kept the old shelves. He said they'd held too many good books to be replaced just because they were worn." Elon nodded, running his hand along one of the refurbished oak shelves. The wood gleamed with new polish, but the deep impressions of decades remained. Small indentations where particularly heavy volumes had rested, subtle scratches from generations of searching fingers. "I have something I'd like to add," he said, reaching into his pocket. "If that's all right with you." Naledi nodded, curious. From his pocket, Elon withdrew a small brass plaque no larger than a business card. He'd had it made early that morning by a jeweler near the hotel who had opened his shop early for a substantial fee. The engraving was simple. To the man who made room for wonder, no name, no dates, no attribution. "Where would you like to put it?" Naledi asked, her voice catching slightly as she read the inscription. Elon considered for a moment, then walked to the far corner of the room where a small alcove had been preserved during the renovation. It had been Mr. Vermaak's favorite spot, Naledi had told him, where he would often sit with a single student who needed particular attention or encouragement. With careful precision, Elon affixed the plaque to the underside of the small wooden table that occupied the space. Not hidden exactly, but not immediately visible either. It would be discovered by those who sat there long enough to truly occupy the space. Those who leaned in, looked deeper, stayed a while. "Perfect," Naledi whispered, watching him. He would have loved that it wasn't front and center. Elon straightened up, feeling a sense of completion wash over him. "I have to catch my flight," he said. "But I'll be back for the scholarship presentations next year, and the year after that." "He didn't expect that, Naledi said. "He thought this would be a one-time visit, a gesture and nothing more." "So did I," Elon admitted. "But I've realized something important while I've been here." "What's that?" "That the most valuable currency isn't what's in my bank accounts. It's what Mr. Vermaak gave me. Attention, second chances, belief." He tapped the notebook, which he'd brought with him. "I've spent my life pursuing efficiency, speed, innovation, but what changed my life wasn't any of those things. It was one man taking the time to see possibility where others saw only problems." Naledi smiled through her grief. "That was his gift." "It's a gift that needs to keep moving," Elon replied. "From him to me, from me to others." As he walked out of the library for the final time, Elon paused at the doorway, taking in the scene once more. The tall windows, the polished shelves, the alcove where generations of boys had sat across from a man who saw in them what they could not yet see in themselves. In the coming days, he would fly back to his companies, his projects, his restless pursuit of the future, but he would carry with him the notebook with its blank page, slowly filling with names. He would carry the memory of evening light in a small garden and stars appearing in a Pretoria sky. Most of all, he would carry the quiet certainty that true legacy isn't measured in monuments or millions, but in moments of intervention. When someone who sees clearly steps into the smoke and confusion of another's life and says, without words, "I see the fire in you. Let me help you direct it." Outside the school gates, his driver waited with the car that would take him to the airport. Before getting in, Elon looked back one last time at the sandstone buildings, the worn steps, the fields where he had once been an awkward outsider. He understood now that he had never really left this place, that it had traveled with him, invisible but essential, through every laboratory, every factory floor, every launch pad. "Ready to go, sir?" the driver asked. Elon nodded, sliding into the back seat. As the car pulled away, he opened the notebook to the blank page and wrote a single sentence beneath Mr. Vermaak's final entry. "The stars are still burning, and now I know why." 3 days later, while Elon was back in Texas reviewing plans for a new spacecraft design, a small funeral procession wound its way through Pretoria's streets to the hillside cemetery where generations of the city's residents rested. Anton Vermaak was laid to rest beneath a simple headstone, surrounded by family, former colleagues, and a handful of former students who had managed to attend on short notice. What none of them knew, what Elon had arranged without fanfare through his foundation, was that starting that very day, a small grant would be deposited annually into the account of every teacher at Pretoria Boys High. Not enough to change their lives dramatically, but enough to let them know that their work mattered, that someone was paying attention. The program's name, listed in the school's financial records only as the Vermaak Continuation, would remain unexplained, a quiet echo of a quiet man. And in libraries, workshops, and classrooms across South Africa, small brass plaques would gradually appear over the coming years. Each bore the same inscription: to the men and women who make room for wonder. Each marked a space renovated, equipped, and dedicated to the principle that had saved a troubled boy decades ago. That discipline looks forward, that potential requires direction, and that sometimes the most innovative act is simply to believe in someone before they have given you reason to do so. In this way, the story that began with a fire in a school laboratory continued beyond its apparent ending, not with dramatic proclamations or public accolades, but with the same quiet attention to individual potential that had characterized Anton Vermaak's life. A ripple effect, moving outward in ever-widening circles from that single moment of mercy and vision. For Elon Musk, billionaire innovator, the most profound legacy he would ever help create began not with a rocket launch or a product unveiling, but with an empty page finally being filled, name by name, possibility by possibility, wonder by wonder. And somewhere beyond understanding, perhaps Anton Vermaak smiled. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.